The Galactic Court was the most respected place in the known universe. Its tall silver walls reached upward, shining with light that came from no sun, but from the energy of the station itself. Delegates from 100 worlds filled the grand hall, their voices mixing into a low hum as they prepared for the signing of a new treaty. The treaty was supposed to bring peace between rival empires, and everyone knew that this day would be remembered for centuries. Humans had been invited only recently into the great circle of civilizations. To most species, they were still a mystery, young and untested, with little influence compared to old and powerful empires. That was why their representative was not a grand diplomat or a high leader, but only a guard, standing near the wall in a uniform of simple black. He kept his head low, hands behind his back, trying not to draw attention. His name was Daniel Rains, a soldier chosen for his calm nature and ability to observe. He had been told that his role was nothing more than symbolic, a reminder that Earth was present in these great decisions. He did not expect to matter. He thought he would spend the day in silence, watching creatures from other worlds make history. But history has a strange way of turning toward the least expected. As the crown envoy of the Lirassi Empire stepped forward, the crowd grew silent. She was tall and graceful, her skin shimmering with patterns of light that moved like rivers. She raised her hands, ready to speak the first words of agreement. The hall held its breath. Then it happened. Her body stiffened, her glowing patterns flickered, and in a single sharp moment she collapsed to the floor. The sound of her fall echoed across the chamber. A cry rose from the crowd. Guards rushed forward, and healers of different species hurried to her side. The treaty was forgotten. In that instant, Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had seen many things in his years of service, but never had he witnessed such silence fall over such a large hall. The delegates whispered in alarm, their voices sharp and nervous. Some accused poison, others muttered about hidden enemies. The air filled with fear, heavy and cold. Alien healers bent over the fallen envoy. Their hands glowed with devices, their eyes changed colors as they scanned for injury. But nothing appeared. No wounds, no toxins, no physical harm. They looked at each other in confusion, their movements growing frantic. Daniel watched carefully. He was not trained in alien medicine, but he noticed details. The envoy's chest still rose and fell with shallow breaths. Her fingers twitched slightly, as if fighting something invisible. The alien healers were focused on her body, but Daniel's eyes turned elsewhere. He scanned the hall itself. The silver walls shimmered faintly, as they always did, but now there was something else. A faint ripple like heat above asphalt moved across the far corner. It was so subtle that he wondered if anyone else could see it. None of the aliens seemed to notice. He frowned, his instincts alert. Years of human training had taught him to trust those small signs, the things others ignored. He did not understand what it meant, but he felt a prickle at the back of his neck, the same feeling soldiers often had before danger appeared. The high judges of the court rose from their seats. Their voices boomed across the hall, demanding calm. But the delegates were restless, fearful that this was an assassination. Some shouted accusations. Old enemies glared at one another. The treaty trembled on the edge of collapse before it had even begun. Daniel took a slow step forward, but another guard, a towering insectoid, blocked him with a sharp gesture. Humans were not meant to interfere. He stopped, returning to his place, but his eyes never left the envoy. The healers lifted her onto a hover stretcher, still unable to explain her sudden fall. She was alive but unresponsive, her body limp, her light patterns fading. The court announced that the ceremony would pause until the mystery was solved. As the crowd began to break apart, Daniel remained where he stood. His thoughts turned over and over. He had seen the ripple. He had felt the wrongness in the air. He could not shake the thought that this was no simple sickness or poison. Something deeper was moving here, something the aliens could not sense. For the first time since arriving in the Galactic Court, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him. He was only a human guard, unnoticed and unimportant. Yet, in that moment, he knew that what had happened was not random. It was a mystery, and somehow he was the only one who had seen the first clue. And though he did not yet understand it, that clue would pull him into a path that would change not just the fate of the court, but the place of humanity in the galaxy. Great Hall of the Galactic Court was in chaos after the collapse of the Crown Envoy. Delegates spoke in fearful tones, some calling for investigations, others blaming rival powers. The once celebratory mood was replaced with suspicion, like a storm cloud spreading across the chamber. Guards of every empire moved their leaders away, creating walls of muscle and armor. Daniel Raines remained at his post, though his mind was far from calm. He could not stop thinking about the ripple he had seen in the air, faint and shifting like heat above the desert. None of the alien healers or guards had noticed it. They had looked only at the fallen envoy's body. But Daniel had seen it, and something deep inside told him it mattered. When the envoy was carried out on the hover stretcher, Daniel quietly followed at a distance, his boots clicking softly against the polished floor. Other guards were too focused on protecting their leaders to notice a human moving among them. He blended in, keeping his head down, pretending he was simply doing his duty. The healers brought the envoy into a private chamber filled with glowing, medical instruments. Strange machines hummed and sang as they scanned her body. Her patterns of light were dim, her breathing shallow. The alien doctors exchanged quick words in their own language, their voices sharp with frustration. No weapon had struck her. No poison had touched her. Yet she lay unmoving as if trapped in a deep, invisible grip. Daniel did not enter the chamber. He stood just outside, watching through the transparent wall. He knew he was not allowed inside, but he also knew that sometimes the best observations came from the edge of things. Soldiers learned to notice what others overlooked, and that habit stayed with him even here. Again, he saw it. The faint ripple brushed across the corner of the chamber, quick as a shadow. It vanished when he blinked, but he was certain it had been there. None of the alien doctors reacted. Their senses must not be built for it, he thought. Humans were different, and perhaps that difference allowed him to notice what others could not. He leaned closer to the wall, narrowing his eyes. The ripple was gone, but the feeling remained like a silent hum in the air, making the hairs on his arms rise. "Human," a voice said behind him. Daniel straightened. One of the tall insectoid guards stared down at him, its many eyes unblinking. "This chamber is restricted. Return to your assigned post." Daniel nodded, keeping his voice calm. "Yes, of course." He walked away, but inside his head questions burned. If he spoke about the ripple, would anyone believe him? The alien species of the court considered humans young and untested. They would laugh at him, or worse, accuse him of inventing stories. Yet he could not ignore what he had seen. Back in the hall, the delegates continued to argue. The treaty was already in danger. Some accused sabotage, others spoke of curses, and a few whispered that ancient enemies had returned. Fear moved through them like fire. Daniel stood silently near the wall, scanning the room again, and then his eyes caught something new. Near one of the smaller envoys, a short reptilian diplomat, the ripple appeared again. It floated above him for just a heartbeat, then vanished. A moment later, the reptilian staggered, clutching his head. Gasps rose from those nearby. The envoy nearly collapsed, but two aides caught him and guided him to a seat. The healers rushed again, surrounding the diplomat. Their instruments glowed and sang, but once more they found nothing. No poison. No wound. No explanation. Daniel's heart quickened. He had been watching. He had seen the ripple appear before the collapse. Twice now, the same pattern. It was not poison in the food or air. It was something unseen, moving like a shadow through the court. Something only he could detect. He clenched his fists, struggling to decide. Should he speak? Would they believe him? The high judges demanded silence, their voices echoing through the hall. Until the cause is found, no treaty may be signed. No one may leave the court. This hall is sealed until order is restored. The great silver doors shut with a loud clang, locking all inside. Delegates looked around in fear, trapped together with suspicion growing thicker every moment. Daniel took a slow breath. He was just a human guard, a symbol among giants. But he could not ignore the truth pressing in on him. Whatever was attacking the delegates, it was not something the others could fight. Their weapons, their machines, their knowledge, none of it had worked. For reasons he did not yet understand, the mystery seemed to fall into his hands. He let his eyes roam the hall again, patient and steady. He knew soldiers were trained to watch the quiet spaces, the small movements others ignored. If the ripple returned, he would be ready. And when it did, faint and quick, sliding along the far wall like a ghost of heat, Daniel Rains did not look away. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Court, Ahu, Manguard might become the one who saw what no other species could see. The sealed hall grew heavy with silence, broken only by the whispers of frightened voices. Delegates from many worlds sat stiffly in their places, their eyes darting across the chamber, watching both their neighbors and the shadows above. Trust was crumbling. The collapse of two envoys had turned the celebration into a nightmare. Daniel Rains stood near the edge of the chamber, calm on the outside but alert within. He had seen the ripple again, faint and strange, moving like an invisible hand through the air. It always came before the sudden weakness of an envoy. The alien healers had found nothing, their instruments blind to it. Only he seemed able to notice the strange disturbance. He thought of Earth's past, of sicknesses that spread without being seen, of gases that killed without smell, of tricks of light that fooled the eye. Humans had learned to survive by watching carefully, by connecting patterns others ignored. He told himself that this was no different. He only had to stay patient, keep observing, and trust his instincts. The high judges of the court argued among themselves, their long robes dragging on the floor as they moved in haste. Some demanded to cancel the treaty. Others shouted that the cause must be found or war would begin again. Fear was stronger than reason. Daniel scanned the chamber. His gaze moved across the balconies, the walls, the air itself. His eyes caught every flicker of light, every twitch of movement. He was not looking for weapons or assassins. He was waiting for the ripple, and then he saw it. It appeared above a tall avian delegate, faint and trembling like water in sunlight. Daniel's breath caught. He stepped forward, heart pounding. The avian delegate swayed, feathers trembling. The ripple hovered closer, unseen by all except him. Daniel's hand twitched as if to reach for his weapon, but he forced himself to hold still. A weapon would do nothing. The ripple was not flesh and blood. "Look!" he whispered sharply to a nearby guard. But the insectoid warrior turned with confusion, seeing nothing. By the time the alien looked, the ripple had vanished, leaving only the avian delegate pale and weak, his voice breaking as he sank into his seat. Gasps echoed again. Another envoy fallen. The healers hurried, their glowing hands moving over the avian's body. But again they shook their heads in frustration. No sign of harm. Daniel clenched his teeth. This was the third time, and the pattern was clear. Something was moving through the court like a silent predator, striking with no weapon, leaving no trace. But why could only he see it? As the healers worked, Daniel stepped back into the shadows, his mind racing. He thought about how humans had always been called strange by the other races. Their minds were restless, their senses average compared to sharper alien eyes or ears, but they were flexible, able to adapt, able to notice small things when they mattered most. Perhaps it was that difference that made him the only one aware of the ripple. He could not stay silent anymore. If more envoys collapsed, the court might break apart entirely. Already shouts of anger filled the chamber. Delegates accused one another, and guards reached for weapons. War was waiting just beyond the door. Daniel took a step forward, raising his voice for the first time. "Wait," he called. The sound was small compared to the alien judge's booming voices, but in the sudden tension, even a human's voice carried. Dozens of eyes turned toward him. He swallowed but stood tall. "I saw something," he said slowly. Not poison, not an attack with weapons, something in the air, a ripple like heat or a shadow. Murmurs spread instantly. Some laughed. In disbelief, others scowled. A few whispered that humans were known for imagination. One of the high judges fixed him with cold eyes. "Human guard," the judge said. "You are here to stand watch, not to speak before the court." Daniel felt the weight of 100 stares. He knew this was dangerous. To speak out of place was almost an insult in this chamber, but he could not stop now. "I saw it each time," he continued, his voice stronger. "Before the envoy fell, before the diplomat collapsed, I saw it again just now. You can't detect it with your machines, but it is there." The judges exchanged uneasy glances. Their instruments had shown nothing. Their healers had found no cause. And yet this human spoke with a steady conviction that made some hesitate. One alien delegate, small and gray-skinned, leaned forward. "If the human sees what we cannot, then perhaps his kind is sensitive to this danger." Another snorted. "Or perhaps he sees illusions." The debate began again, louder and sharper. Daniel stood in the center, feeling both exposed and ignored. They might not believe him, but he had planted a seed. If even a few began to doubt their own senses, perhaps they would watch more carefully. As the voices clashed, Daniel noticed movement again. His eyes darted to the far corner, and there it was, the ripple, faint but clear, sliding along the wall like a silent wave. No one else reacted. No one else even turned their heads. His heart thudded. He alone saw the predator moving freely through the court. And if no one listened to him, it would keep striking until the hall was filled with silence and fear. Daniel straightened his back. If no one else would act, then he would. He did not yet know how, but he was a soldier, and soldiers learned to fight with whatever they had, even if that meant standing alone. The great hall of the Galactic Court no longer felt like a place of peace. The silver walls that once shone with light now seemed cold and heavy, trapping everyone inside with fear. Delegates whispered to each other in tight groups, their guards standing close, hands resting on weapons. The treaty that was supposed to bring unity had become a cage of suspicion. Daniel Raines stood alone near the center. He had spoken the truth, but most had dismissed him. Some laughed, others glared, and a few whispered that humans were known for strange imaginations. Yet he could not regret speaking. The ripple was real. He had seen it again and again. Each time, another envoy had fallen. The high judges ordered more scans, more checks of food, air, and water. Great machines hummed, sending bright waves of color through the chamber. But nothing unusual appeared. The alien healers grew more frustrated, their devices useless against an enemy they could not see. Daniel's hands curled into fists. Machines could not always explain danger. On Earth, people had survived storms, plagues, and unseen poisons long before machines could measure them. They had survived because they watched, they adapted, and they trusted their instincts. That was what he was doing now. Still, the others saw him as a nuisance. When he tried to move closer to the judges, 2 insectoid guards blocked his way. "Return to your place, human," one of them hissed. "Do not speak again without permission." Daniel nodded, but inside, frustration burned. If they would not listen, then he would act on his own. Hours passed. The hall grew more tense with every moment. Delegates demanded to leave, but the doors remained locked. No one was allowed out until the mystery was solved. The longer they were trapped, the sharper their anger grew. Accusations flew between rival empires. The chance of war was thick in the air. Then it happened again. The ripple appeared above a group of delegates sitting close together. Daniel saw it move like a wave of invisible water, slow and deliberate. His breath caught. He knew what would happen next. "Watch," he shouted, pointing. But no one followed his hand. A heartbeat later, one of the delegates gasped and collapsed, her aides rushing to catch her before she hit the floor. Cries filled the chamber. Weapons were drawn. The healers rushed again, their scans useless, their faces pale with fear. The high judges shouted for silence, but their voices shook now. Even they were beginning to lose control. Daniel stepped forward louder this time. I told you, it is not poison or weapons. Something is moving through the air. You can't see it, but I can. If you keep ignoring this, more will fall. Doni. Hall erupted with noise. Some shouted for the human to be removed. Others, more uncertain now, asked what he had seen exactly. For the first time, doubt spread not toward him but toward the court itself. One judge raised a long hand for quiet. His voice was steady but tired. Human guard, he said. If you claim to see what we cannot, then prove it. Show us where. This ripple will appear next. If you fail, you will be silenced. Daniel felt every eye on him. The weight was heavy, but he straightened his back. Then watch with me, he said firmly. Don't look only at your machines. Look at the air. Trust your eyes. Wait, the chamber grew quiet again. Even those who doubted him could not ignore the strange courage in his voice. Slowly, the shouting faded, and a tense stillness filled the room. Daniel's eyes swept the chamber. He let his breathing slow. He had trained for moments like this, though never on such a scale. A soldier learned to notice the small details, the shift of dust, the flicker of shadow, the hint of movement in the corner of the eye. He waited, his gaze calm but sharp. Minutes passed. The silence was heavy. Some began to mutter again, but then, "There," Daniel said softly, pointing to the far balcony. At first, no one reacted, but then a few delegates squinted, frowning. Something was there, faint, so faint, like a shimmer of heat against the silver wall. Gasps rose. Not all saw it, but enough did to hush the room. The ripple slid downward, closer to a group of envoys seated below. Daniel's voice was firm. It will strike there, watch. Every eye turned, every breath held. A moment later, one of the envoys shuddered and slumped in his seat, eyes rolling closed. Cries erupted again, but this time all knew the human had been right. He had called it before it happened. Shock spread across the hall. Some aliens trembled, others whispered in awe. The high judge who had doubted him stared in silence, his long fingers curling against his robe. Daniel exhaled slowly. Now you believe me, he said quietly. The hall was no longer mocking him. Fear still ruled the air, but now it mixed with something new. Attention. For the first time they were listening. The judges gathered in a circle, their voices hushed, but urgent. At last one spoke. Human guard, if you can see this danger when we cannot, then you will help us find its source. The court gives you permission to act. Daniel felt the weight of those words. He was only a guard, chosen to stand quietly, nothing more. But now the fate of the court, perhaps even the galaxy, was being placed into his hands. He nodded once, his voice steady. I will. And for the first time since the crisis began, a flicker of hope touched the air of the galactic court. The chamber of the galactic court was no longer filled with mockery. Instead, it carried a new kind of silence. The delegates leaned forward in their seats, their eyes fixed on Daniel Raines, the lone human guard who had predicted the collapse before it happened. Fear had shifted into a strange mixture of respect and unease. For the first time, the court gave him permission to act. Daniel felt the weight of that trust pressing against his chest. He had not come here to lead or to solve mysteries. He had come as a symbol, a guard in black uniform, meant to stand quietly while greater powers shaped the galaxy. Yet now, he found himself holding the attention of every empire in the hall. The high judge, tall and robed in silver threads, spoke with a voice like thunder. Human, if you see what we cannot, then guide us. What is this danger? Who controls it? Daniel shook his head slowly. It isn't a person with a weapon. It isn't poison or trickery. It's something else. Something that moves unseen, like a shadow feeding on us. The delegates muttered nervously, their voices echoing against the walls. Some whispered of curses. Others spoke of forgotten weapons from ancient wars. The fear was thick, wrapping around them all. Daniel stayed calm, watching the air as he spoke. I don't think it is targeting food or water. It moves where fear is greatest. Each envoy that collapsed was under heavy pressure, speaking before rivals, carrying great responsibility. Whatever this is, it feeds on them. It grows stronger in the middle of conflict. The words sent a chill across the room. Many looked at one another with wide eyes. The court had existed for centuries, filled with endless debates, rivalries, and hidden tensions. If something invisible had been feeding on that for years, then perhaps it had been here all along. The healers turned to their instruments, scanning again. Their lights flashed and their songs rose, but still their devices found nothing. They shook their heads, helpless. Daniel thought hard. On Earth there had been things too small to see. Bacteria, viruses, invisible dangers that killed millions until humans learned to fight them. Maybe this was similar, though not physical. Maybe it was a creature of energy, hidden from the senses of other species. He remembered how he had seen it shimmer, like heat rising from a road. Perhaps humans, with their restless brains and strange instincts, were simply tuned to notice what others could not. If so, then he was the only one who could track it. He stepped forward, his boots echoing softly. You won't find it with your machines, he said. But I can find it with my eyes. If you let me follow it, maybe I can lead you to where it hides. The judges hesitated. To put the safety of the court in the hands of a human guard was unheard of. But they had no choice. Every moment of waiting meant another envoy could collapse. Finally, the high judge gave a slow nod. Very well. Human, the court grants you authority to investigate. Guards, you will allow him passage. Gasps filled the chamber. A guard? Given authority above even envoys? It was shocking, but no one dared argue. The fear of the ripple was stronger than their pride. Daniel bowed his head slightly, then turned his gaze back to the walls. He let his focus narrow. Soldiers had learned patience, the ability to watch for hours with no movement, waiting for the single sign that mattered. He waited, every nerve sharp, scanning the shimmering edges of the hall. Then he saw it. The ripple slid across the wall like a faint wave, moving slowly toward the chamber doors. Daniel moved quickly, following it. Guards shifted nervously as he walked past them, but none stopped him now. The ripple slipped through a narrow corridor behind the hall. Daniel followed, his step steady. The passage was dim, lined with tall silver columns that glowed faintly. He kept his eyes fixed ahead, watching the strange distortion. It moved like it had a mind of its own, twisting and bending, almost playful. Daniel felt a chill as he realized it was not just energy, it was alive. He whispered to himself, "You're not a weapon, you're a predator." The ripple pulsed, almost as if it had heard him. Behind him, a few alien guards followed at a distance, their faces tense, unsure of what they were chasing. They could not see what he saw, but they trusted his movements. The ripple stopped near a high corner of the corridor, lingering as though it rested there. Daniel narrowed his eyes. For the first time, he noticed something more. Tiny sparks at its edge, like stars flickering. It was feeding, drawing in the fear that filled the court behind them. His chest tightened. If this thing grew stronger every time panic spread, then it might never leave. It had likely been hiding here for centuries, growing fat on endless debates, rivalries and wars. No one had ever noticed because no one could see it, only him. The thought was heavy, but it also filled him with resolve. Humanity had been seen as weak, as inexperienced, as a young race with little to offer. Yet now his difference was the one thing that mattered. He turned back to the guards who had followed. "It's real," he said firmly. "It isn't a ghost or illusion. It's alive, and it's been feeding on us for years. If we don't stop it now, it will keep growing, and this court will never know peace." The guards shifted uneasily, unable to see what he saw, but his conviction was strong enough to make them believe. Daniel faced the ripple again, his eyes steady. "You've hidden long enough," he whispered. For the first time, the shimmer pulsed brighter than before, as if it knew it had been discovered. The corridor behind the grand chamber was cold and quiet. But Daniel Raines felt the weight of unseen eyes on him. The ripple shimmered faintly near the corner, shifting like a mirage. It was not just a flicker of energy. It was alive, and it knew it had been discovered. The alien guards behind him shuffled uneasily. They could not see what Daniel saw, but they felt the tension in the air. Their antennae twitched, feathers ruffled, scales pressed tight to skin. Even without sight, they sensed danger. Daniel spoke softly, his voice steady. "You can't hide anymore. I know you're there." The ripple pulsed once, almost like a response. A faint hum touched the back of his mind. A low vibration that wasn't sound but feeling. His head throbbed slightly, his chest tightened. It was as if the thing was testing him, pressing invisible fingers against his thoughts. Daniel gritted, his teeth. "No," he whispered. "You don't get in." He remembered his training on Earth. Soldiers were taught to resist pressure, to keep calm under fear, to push back against panic. Humanity had survived storms, battles, and nightmares. By learning to stand firm when everything screamed to run, that resilience was now his shield. The alien guards looked at him confused. "What do you see, human?" one asked nervously. Daniel didn't take his eyes from the ripple. "It's feeding on us. Every fear, every doubt in the court. It grows, stronger from it. That's why it struck the envoys who carried the most pressure, but it can't touch me the same way." The guards exchanged glances. They didn't understand, but his voice carried conviction. That was enough. Daniel took a slow step forward. The ripple quivered, then drifted back, like an animal wary of being cornered. "Yeah," Daniel said under his breath. "You're scared, now." The hum in his mind grew sharper, like claws scraping against glass. Images flickered, shadows of doubt, flashes of war, faces of fear. It was trying to overwhelm him, to drown him in illusions. But Daniel pushed back. He remembered the long nights on Earth when soldiers held the line with nothing but willpower. He remembered his mother's words when he was young. "Fear is only as strong as you let it be." He steadied his breath, his heart beating strong and even. The images faded like smoke. The ripple pulsed again, weaker this time. Behind him, the guards gasped as the air flickered faintly. For the first time, even they could see a slight distortion, like a veil tearing at the edges. "It's showing itself," Daniel said firmly. "It's losing control." One guard raised his weapon nervously. "Should we strike it?" Daniel shook his head. "No, blades and beams won't work. This thing isn't made of flesh. If you attack it like that, it'll only feed on your fear when it doesn't fall." He stepped closer, eyes locked on the shimmer. What hurts it is not fear but strength. Calm, resolve. That's something it can't eat. The ripple trembled violently, then shot down the corridor, slipping through the air like a current. Daniel broke into a run, the guards following behind. They turned corners, past glowing columns, and entered a wide chamber filled with humming energy conduits. The ripple hung there, pulsing as though it had reached its nest. Daniel slowed his steps. He could feel the hum again, pressing harder, against his mind. It whispered of failure, of weakness, of war that could never end. He felt a chill creep down his spine, but he set his jaw. "You've been hiding here for centuries, haven't you?" he said. "Feeding on arguments, lies, and anger. This court is your hunting ground, but not anymore." The ripple quivered like a wounded beast. Sparks of light flicked from its edges, scattering like dust. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. He focused not on fear, but on the things that made humans strong. The stubborn will to keep going, the drive to stand together even when everything fell apart, the strange spark of hope that never seemed to die. He remembered laughter with his fellow soldiers, the steady handshakes of trust, the faces of people who refused to give up. When he opened his eyes again, he spoke with quiet certainty. "You can't break me, and you won't break us." The ripple screamed without sound. The walls shook faintly as its shape grew brighter, more visible. The alien guards covered their eyes, gasping, but Daniel stood firm. Step by step he advanced. The ripple twisted, striking at him with waves of fear, but each time he pushed through, his calm stronger than its hunger. His human resilience. Strange, and stubborn, burned like a shield. The shimmer retreated, pressed against the corner of the chamber, its form unstable. Daniel reached out a hand, not to strike but to claim victory. "You don't belong here," he said firmly. "Leave." With a final pulse, the ripple tore itself from the air, vanishing in a rush of silence. The chamber stilled. The hum faded. For the first time since the envoy had collapsed, the weight in the air lifted. Daniel lowered his hand slowly. Sweat lined his brow, but his breathing was steady. Behind him, the guards stared in awe. "It's gone," one whispered. Daniel nodded. "For now. But it will try again. We have to warn the court. They need to know what it is and how to fight it. Not with weapons, but with strength they don't even realize they have." As they walked back toward the hall, Daniel knew the truth. Humanity's greatest weapon was not technology, not power, but the simple ability to endure, to resist fear, and to hold hope when all else failed. And that was something the galaxy had never seen before. The galactic court felt different as Daniel Rains led the alien guards back into the Great Hall. The ripple, the strange predator feeding on fear, was gone, for now, yet the air was still heavy with tension. Delegates whispered nervously, casting glances at each other, wondering who had caused the collapse, and if the danger could return. Daniel paused at the center of the hall. Every eye turned to him. Humans had always been considered minor players in galactic affairs. Their species was young, untested, and often overlooked. Today, however, he stood in the middle of the court, no longer just a guard, but the one who had seen what no one else could. He spoke slowly, clearly, so everyone could hear. "The threat you faced is not a person, a weapon, or a poison. It is a creature of fear. It feeds on doubt, on panic, and it grows stronger every time you allow it to control you." Gasps filled the room. Delegates looked at their neighbors, their expressions a mixture of horror and disbelief. The high judges leaned forward, their faces pale beneath the silver threads of their robes. Daniel continued, "I could see it because humans are different. We notice things others ignore. We can resist fear in ways others cannot. That is what saved your envoys, and it is what can keep the court safe." A small, gray-skinned delegate, one who had earlier whispered about human sensitivity, stood. "So you claim your kind is immune to this creature?" Daniel shook his head. "Not immune, but adaptable. We can face fear and hold it steady. That is our strength." Silence fell across the chamber. The judges looked at one another, weighing his words. None had ever heard such a thing before. A human explaining a danger no alien instrument could detect, and offering a way to resist. And then the ripple shimmered faintly again. Not fully visible, but enough to remind them all that the threat had not completely vanished. Some envoys gasped, others shivered. Daniel raised a hand, calm but firm. "It can return if fear dominates this hall. If you panic, it will come back. But if you stay calm, if you face it without doubt, it cannot harm you. That is the only way." One of the judges, an ancient figure with long limbs and glimmering eyes, leaned forward. "Human, you have seen what centuries of wisdom and machines could not detect. You have acted where others hesitated. You are remarkable." Daniel bowed slightly. "I did what anyone trained to notice small things would do. I only used what humans have always used: observation, patience, and resolve." A murmur ran through the hall. Delegates looked at each other, realizing for the first time that the humans, once considered weak, had qualities that could tip the balance in ways no alien could match. The high judge raised his voice, strong and clear. "Today, the court learns that strength comes in many forms. Not all are visible, not all are measured by technology. Humanity has shown that even young and untested species may hold the key to survival." A hush fell, and then, slowly, applause spread through the chamber. Not loud, not triumphant, but respectful, thoughtful. The delegates were beginning to understand what had happened. Daniel had done what they could not. He walked toward the high dais, the guards clearing a path. Even the envoys who had collapsed looked up at him with new respect. His heart beat steadily, not with pride but with relief. The court was safe, for now, and humanity had earned recognition, not by conquest or power, but by simply seeing what others could not. Daniel addressed the room again. You must remember, fear is everywhere. It is easy to let it control you, especially in a hall full of tension and rivalry. But you can resist. You can act carefully, calmly, and together. That is the way to keep this court, and this galaxy, safe. For the first time in centuries, the court felt a sense of unity. Delegates leaned forward, listening not just to machines or instruments, but to the wisdom of one human guard. They began to whisper to each other in less fear and more curiosity. Some asked questions, some sought guidance. And in that moment, Daniel realized something. Humans had often been underestimated, dismissed as too small or young to matter. But now, in the face of a danger no alien had understood, humanity's difference, their ability to adapt, observe, and endure, had proven to be a gift, a force the galaxy could not ignore. The ripple was gone completely now, banished by the courage and calm of a single human. The envoys rose from their seats, still cautious, but no longer in fear. The court would resume its business, but nothing would be the same again. The High Judge spoke last, his voice carrying across the chamber. Let it be known, humanity is not merely a guest among the stars. Their vision, courage, and resilience are now part of the fabric of our court. They will be respected, and their place in the galaxy will grow, for they have shown what it means to face the unseen and survive. Daniel looked around the hall, seeing eyes that had once doubted him now filled with recognition. He smiled faintly, a quiet satisfaction. He had done what no one else could, not through weapons, not through machines, but through simple human determination. And in that moment, he understood something deep and true. Humans were not just part of the galaxy. Humans were extraordinary, capable of seeing beyond what others could imagine and of turning fear into strength. The court had survived. The envoys were safe, and humanity had taken its first true step into the heart of the stars.